President Moore, you've been president for Atlanta City Council for the past 3.5 years. Could you describe what that role entails, and for those unfamiliar with the job like myself, how it has influenced your run?
So there are 3 branches of government, as you may remember from middle and high school. There's the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The judicial is our city courts. The executive is the mayor's office. The mayor is the chief executive officer who's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city, and all of the departments, police, fire, water, public works, all of those are a report to the mayor. I am on the legislative side of the house, so I started as a council member. Well, I really started well before that as a council aide and a council member. And a council member is responsible for oversight, approving budgets, setting laws, and creating policy. So now I'm council president. I served 5 terms as council member. We can talk about that a little bit later. But the council president is not a member of council. So the council president sort of has their one foot on the legislative side and 1 foot on the executive side, because if anything ever happened to the mayor resigned, then I would become the mayor, depending on the timing. And also the council president can't introduce legislation, and I only vote in case of a tie. I do vote in case of a tie only in the council meeting, and I don't serve on the committees, but I can participate in all of our 7 standing committees. I appoint the chair of the committees, and I appoint the members of the committee, and then I do many other things or whatever other things I would like to do to try to move the city forward. I've been fortunate as being president of council that I have been able to author legislation, and then I can get a council member to introduce it, and then they pass it.
Gotcha. With that being said, what is your vision first for downtown Atlanta, and then more specifically for Edgewood Avenue?
Well, I think that specifically for downtown Atlanta, I've watched downtown Atlanta evolve over the years, but not really gotten to where, when I travel to other major metropolitan cities, where I'd like to see it go. I'd like it to be a thriving nightlife where people can go to restaurants, enjoy themselves, and it keeps moving and keep bustling from the time when people are there to work to the evening. One of the major centerpieces of downtown is Underground Atlanta. And, you know, many people have fond memories of when it was a bustling, thriving location. So my vision would be to see that we get Underground Atlanta back to a really productive use where it will attract people. I certainly want to make sure we now have residents downtown, that they're supported. I talked to many of them. And then see if we can get more bars and restaurants and other nightlife, so in the evening it just doesn't die and everybody goes away, right. That it keeps moving and it become an economic generator. As far as this area here, it has become a pretty bustling place. I've come through here late in the evenings, and we've had some issues and concerns. I know that they have recently closed it off to vehicular traffic. So I have not been down to see what it's like then, but perhaps without the cars, it can be more open and a freer space for people to be able to migrate from one location to another. So we certainly want to support that. And in the Sweet Auburn Avenue, my dream and vision would be to be as supportive as I can to make sure that we get Sweet Auburn to be sweet again.
At least right here in the Old Fourth Ward, we've seen property values rise due to the Beltline. How do you plan to address displacement of people and communities?
Well, so the Beltline, I will say, has changed the game and has accelerated gentrification in the city. When the Beltline came through, I did not support the tax allocation district, which is the funding mechanism for the Beltline, because of many reasons. One, many of the areas did not need that support. A tax allocation district is really for blighted areas. Needless to say, I still fought to make sure that we had the provisions of an affordable housing trust fund, and that trust fund was established but was not implemented. And so as mayor, one of the things I'm going to do is go back and look and see what is going on with that trust fund, how we can best utilize the money that we have to help keep it affordable. One thing that has been successful over in the Vine City English Avenue area is a non-displacement fund, where also we had corporations and businesses contribute so that when residents that or legacy residents had trouble paying their taxes or paying their bills, that they could go and get assistance. That helps them to stay in the neighborhood. Old Fourth Ward, as well as the rest of the city, I don't want to use the word that's in my head, but we all have to understand that this market, I liken it to analogy of the weather. So if it's raining, you can't stop the rain because we don't control that, but what you can do is get your umbrella up, you can put your awnings up, you can roll up your windows. And so we're going to have to find ways to protect ourselves because the market is driving a lot of this, and there's many things, factors that make it hard to control. But in the Old Fourth Ward particularly, I know Boulevard, every time you go, there's a new building.
Right.
That may be difficult. I think that may be outgone. But there are other single-family neighborhoods that are behind the Boulevard area. If we can be supportive of those and to try to find an anti-displacement fund, maybe we may be able to at least starve off the rain for a little bit.
Absolutely. Do you have any big plans for evolving the city's transportation system?
Well, you know, I always say MARTA, you know, is our major transportation hub. And I like it, MARTA has two purposes. One, for people who can't afford anything else but MARTA to get where they need to go. And two, for people who choose to use it. And we need it for both. And we need it to be seamless, and we need to make sure that people are able to get where they need to go. I'm glad that many of the bus lines are back online now that had closed down during COVID, but we know that there's a lot more that needs to happen. One would be great if we got the Beltline, the transit that was promised when we started the Beltline, because that connects a lot of neighborhoods. We also need to work with MARTA to see if we can get more bus service on track. Maybe smaller buses, maybe we don't need all the huge buses, and get them closer to where people live. Because in my neighborhood, people who need MARTA have to some walk miles just to get to a MARTA stop.
Absolutely. Do you have any plans to change the NPU structure in order to better involve the community in some of the decision-making processes?
Well, I wouldn't say that I have plans, but I do think that certainly it's time for us to relook at our NPU system and how we can make it better. And many times people who are participating in the neighborhood planning unit are not willing to change. I came out of the NPU system.
Right.
I was a chair of a neighborhood planning unit. So I know how you get familiar with your processes and what you do. I do think COVID has taught us that we can open it up to more people. I would like to see a hybrid where if they start to physically meet, that they can also virtually meet for people who may not want to come specifically to the meeting, but can watch it virtually. So I think that gives us an opportunity to increase and enhance that. Some neighborhood planning units have a lot of internal conflict. As mayor, I would like to see that we have a process so that when people are having conflicts, they can get resolved. A lot of times they don't get resolved. No one wants to get into NPU's business. But I do think we have to have a resolution process, and we need to make sure that we can open it up to more people.
For sure. I know a hot topic with NPUM here is homelessness. Comes up a lot about the Sweet Auburn District and Edgewood Avenue. What is your strategy to kind of reduce homelessness in the city?
Okay, so that one's a difficult question to answer very quickly, but I'm going to try to keep it succinct. And I call it the unsheltered population because that is what we're dealing with, and it is growing. Many people are unsheltered in plain sight. Many of them are living in cars because they've been evicted, particularly since COVID and all of that. And many of them are right outside the city in extended stay hotels, et cetera. So it's not an easy answer because there's a need for housing for people who don't have homes, for seniors. It hurts my heart to see senior citizens live their life and then find themselves homeless on the street. Single women, women with children, single men, those who have mental illness, those who have alcohol and drug addiction, those who want help, and those who don't want the help. And so what's happening, many people choosing to stay on the street because, one, they can't get into some of the facilities we have because they have barriers or rules, and they don't want to follow those rules, or they don't like the way that they operate. And so many of them are choosing to stay on the street. I think we've got to have a variety housing for a variety of people. But then the roadblock to that sometimes becomes the neighborhoods. Because when you say, I want to put this facility in your neighborhood, what are the neighbors going to say? So that's an impediment. But here's the biggest one. The city of Atlanta cannot solve this by ourselves. We've got to do it with nonprofit organizations. We've got to do it with Fulton County, with the state. The state's got to step up and help us with the mental illness piece and funding and money. And our surrounding jurisdictions have to stop dropping everyone off in Atlanta. And so I'm having a study done as a part of the ARC, and I'm looking forward to the findings because anecdotally, I've heard from other elected officials in some of our smaller cities that they don't provide any services to the unsheltered. And so when they get tired of them, or they hear us announce that we have an 800-bed facility, they say, they get them in a car and they drop them off in Atlanta. And so not only is that happening inside the region and inside the state, it's also happening from other cities. There was a report maybe a year or so ago where New York City was sending them one-way tickets here. So what I'm trying to say is we can't get to a point where we can resolve the issue if we continue to receive more people and not have the resources to deal with what we have.
Absolutely. What are your top 3 strategies, so to speak, to drive crime lower than what it is today?
Oh, well, crime, that's the number one issue in the city. The next one after that is potholes. But the first one is crime in the city. And so I sort of put it in maybe 5 categories. So it's the cops, it is the courts, it's code enforcement, it's the children, and it's the community. So the top 3 are the cops. So number 1, we have got to move on some of the criminal justice reform and social justice reform measures that we've studied since we had many of the demonstrations come. We've got to make sure that we have officers that are keeping our neighborhoods safe and making sure that people feel safe in their interactions with our police officers. So that's first and foremost. But right now, today, we are down 400 to 500 officers, which many people, some say 400, some say 500. And so not having enough officers and that presence on the street or their ability to respond in a timely manner, I believe gives people a thought that they have permission to do whatever they want to in Atlanta. And then we've been open and people have come here from other cities, and I think they're running into people that they probably don't want to run into, and then we're finding issues with that. So first of all, we got to get the number of officers there. I have several ideas on how we can get some of the sworn officers out from behind the desk and on the street immediately to help augment that that's going on with the numbers being so low. And our officers are doing a good job. I mean, they're out there, they're arresting people, but what's happening is when they get to the courts. And that's something that the mayor doesn't have direct responsibility over, but can be a big mouth, bully pulpit advocate for us getting that done. There are many people who are committing violent and they're repeat offenders that are being let out. And so we don't want to lock up anybody we don't have to, but if you are a repeat offender and a violent offender, you should be there until you get to court, which speaks to the courts who are now reporting that they're going to be 2 to 3 years behind in cases because the courts have been closed down with COVID. So it's just a vicious cycle, but I want to make sure that Fulton County Commission, the courts, the DA, the magistrate court judges, all of them know that this is important to our community, and it's important for us to feel safe in our community, and that deals with the courts. And then the third one is code enforcement. We have codes related to bars and nightclubs.
I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm gonna say it.
Oh man.
And the restaurants that are nightclubs that are masquerading as restaurants. And so as mayor, what I would be doing is immediately calling a meeting of all of the alcohol licensed beverage holders and going over the rules. They should already know them.
Yes.
But going over the rules and say, you know, these are the rules, and if you're violating those, we're going to enforce the law.
Of course.
And then I'm going to enforce the law. I always think it's good to tell people what you're doing, because I liken it to, you know, that parking space that you know that you're supposed to pay for, the meter, and if you get away with parking there and nobody tickets you, you keep doing it. So if you get that ticket, you know you're going to be in trouble. So we've got to tighten that up, because many of them, there's some that aren't even licensed that are operating. And what's happening is that is putting a strain on our police officers and their response time, and it's really causing a lot of havoc in some of the neighboring communities.
Can I just ask you, do you support the legalization or reclassification of marijuana?
So the council did pass the decriminalization of marijuana. That's already been done. Don't get too happy now. So make sure you keep your happiness under an ounce. Yes. Okay? Keep it under an ounce, and you will get a ticket. It's not legal. You will get a ticket, but if you get more than an ounce, you're going to state court, and you're going to have a felony charge. So
yes,
just
ma'am.
make sure you measure it out.
If you won a $10 million mayor lottery, what would you do with the money?
Wow. So there's so many things that the city needs that I would love to put it towards. I'd put some towards the unsheltered population. I'd fill some potholes, maybe hire some more officers. Yeah, I think that's what I would do. And then the other thing I would do is I would use some of it to enhance the pay of many employees that have not received pay raises. We have been focused on police and fire, which is great, our public safety people, but there are other people who support them that get overlooked at budget time, and I would give them the rest.
If you could change one thing about our zoning code, what would it be and why?
So I thought about that one, and I think the whole zoning code right now is in the process of rewrite. One thing that has been an issue is the number of unrelated people in a household. And right now you can have up to 6 unrelated people in a household, and some people have stretched that to kind of make them like boarding houses. Yeah. So that would be something I would look at and maybe make some changes.
For our audience and viewers, could you summarize like the pros and the cons of the recent voting bill from your perspective?
Let me just say this. Anything that makes it more difficult for people to exercise their right to vote, I am not for. So I don't know where the pros are in doing that, other than you're cutting off your own nose to spite your face, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. Any ability to call back accessibility to people to the ballot, so their voices can be heard, hurts us all.
Do you believe that the minimum wage should be raised to $15? And if so, do you plan to do so during your term?
So I'm all for the fight for 15.
Yeah.
And before the fight for 15, it was the $10 livable wage, and I authored that on council to make sure that all of our city employees, first we tried to do it where we mandated that every business in the city do that, but of course the business people came out and that didn't happen, but we did do it within the city, and I also supported and authored that legislation for the 15 for the city of Atlanta. So all of our city of Atlanta employees make $15 or more, and if we could, without the state preempting us and keeping us from doing it, we would certainly try to get it done for the rest of the city.
And for our last question, in such a crowded mayoral race, what are the top 3 things that make you stand out from the others?
Well, first of all, my name is Felicia Moore, and I'm running for mayor of Atlanta. And so that none of them can say that. But secondly, I have a breadth of experience that none of the candidates have, and not or one of them. My pages and list of accomplishments as council member is over any other ones that are in the race. So I've accomplished a lot of things, making sure citizens can have input, making sure that people get the livable wages, making sure that we are being fiscally responsible, making sure we're running an ethical, transparent, and accountable government. So I have been on the front lines of all of those, being a very consistent and constant voice, and speaking truth to power at city government for all of those years. So that is, I mean, I kind of put all three of them in one. So I have that unique skill set in that I've had it and I've done it before. I know where the bodies are buried, and I know where the graves are for the ones I haven't uncovered. I talk to the city employees. I talk to the people who pick up your trash, the people who fill the potholes, the people who do the work. Many elected officials don't do that, and I bear to say that none of them can ravel the fact that my phone rings all the time. And I know that in our city government, the reason why we're not getting the services that we need is because there's been no attention to the details. There's been no attention to the departments. Nobody has gone and pulled out the weeds and fixed it. And that's what I want to do so that we can get the outcomes that we want, that we can get the city services that we deserve. So I know city government better than any candidate, even if they call themselves having run city government. I know city government better than any candidate that there is. And so that's why I should be your mayor. Please.
We got time for 3 questions, and then President Moore has somewhere to go. Anybody?
I've been living in the neighborhood for, it made 5 years on June 13th, and we've closed shelters. We've barricaded off what they would call their homes, and pushed them all into a corner, into a space where they're hostile, they're angry. So I'm just curious as what's happening, what are we building for them?
When the Peachtree and Pine Shelter used to house up to 800 people, back in the Reid administration, they wanted to close it. And I said, we don't need to close it, we need to put them out of business. The way you put them out of business, that means that you at least, at minimum, replace those 800 beds, and that didn't happen. So I was the only one at the end of the day that voted no. So those 800 people, as far as I'm concerned, are out on the street. And so I talked about this earlier, there is no plan to build anything else.
I was gonna ask you, what color is your jacket? It's dope.
Oh, it's actually orange.
Facts.
Hi,
Hi,
how are you?
the beautiful pink dress.
Oh, thank you. I'm from New York originally, and but my question is, as far as housing, I know even on like Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue, there was a legal mandate that 10 of those units had to be for public housing. Like even if it was like on the bottom floor, the first 2 floors, and then the rich lived up top. Is Atlanta looking to do some of those same things? Like, is there a mandatory thing to have at least 5 to 6 units in a complex that can be dedicated to like a Section 8 or like something like that? And if not, are you looking forward to doing that in your term?
So the city has inclusionary zoning. So if you ask for additional density in a building, you have to have I think it's 5 to 10% of affordability. If you come for tax credits or incentives from the city to build something, you have to put anywhere between 10 and 20% affordable housing. So we do have that if you are seeking government assistance. If you do it privately, unless you're asking for density bonuses, it's not required.
All right, y'all. We got to go. Thank you, President Moore. We
Thank
appreciate
you. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Our bar, little bitch.